The first Devourer scout was massive beyond anything the crew of the Hanbit had ever imagined. As it approached their position, Captain Deho could see that it was easily 3 times larger than their ship. Its biomechanical hull rippled with muscle and metal, while long tentacles reached out like the arms of some ancient sea monster. "Battle stations," Deho ordered, his voice calm despite the fear he felt in his stomach. The crew moved quickly to their positions. Janae brought the ship's weapons online, though they all knew their laser cannons were designed for clearing space debris, not fighting monsters. Tae-young took manual control of the ship's flight systems. Bora began working frantically to modify their systems using the data they had received from Cathara's ship. "Captain," Janae reported, "our weapons are designed for mining and research. The Devourer's hull appears to be some kind of organic armor over a metal framework. Our lasers might not even damage it." "Then we'll have to be smarter than it is," Deho replied. He turned to their pilot. "Tae-young, remember all those flying tricks they told you never to try in training?" The young pilot's face lit up with understanding. "You mean the ones that would get me thrown out of flight school?" "Those are exactly the ones I want to see right now." The Hanbit suddenly accelerated toward a dense cluster of asteroids. The Devourer followed, its tentacles lashing out to grab the much smaller human ship. But Tae-young was flying like he had never flown before, using the floating rocks as a 3-dimensional maze. The human ship twisted and spun between asteroids that should have crushed it. It dove through gaps barely wide enough for its hull and used the gravitational pull of larger rocks to change direction in ways that seemed to violate physics. The Devourer, built for consuming stationary planets, could not keep up with these wild maneuvers. "Now, Janae," Deho shouted. The modified laser cannons fired, their beams enhanced by the alien technology Bora had integrated into their systems. The concentrated energy hit the Devourer in what the alien data had indicated was a vulnerable spot. The creature let out a sound like metal being torn apart, and dark fluid leaked from the wound. But the Devourer was far from dead. Instead, it seemed to get angry. 2 more scout ships appeared on the sensors drawn by their partners' distress signals. Now 3 of the massive creatures were hunting the tiny human ship through the asteroid field. "Captain," Sumi called out urgently, "I'm receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command." "Put it through," Deho ordered while the ship shook from another near miss. Admiral Sang-min's face appeared on the main screen. He looked both worried and furious. "Captain Deho, I've received your preliminary report about first contact with alien life. I am ordering you to disengage immediately and return to human space for debriefing." "Admiral," Deho replied as the ship spun to avoid a grasping tentacle. "These creatures have destroyed multiple star systems. If we don't stop them here, they might eventually reach our colonies." "That is not your decision to make, Captain. You are commanding a research vessel with civilian scientists on board. Your primary duty is to protect them." Dr. Hyunwoo looked up from his translation work. "Admiral, I've been analyzing the data from the alien ship. There are hundreds of civilizations hiding throughout the galaxy, all afraid of these Devourers. If humanity runs away like everyone else, we're just another species waiting to be hunted." There was a pause in the transmission. Admiral Sang-min was clearly consulting with others. In the background, they could hear the voices of the Earth Defense Council meeting in emergency session. "Captain," came another voice. "President Hana, the leader of Earth's government. Do you honestly believe your single ship can make a difference against these creatures?" Deho looked around his bridge. Tae-young was still performing impossible flying maneuvers, sweat running down his face as he pushed both himself and the ship beyond their limits. Jinae was calculating firing solutions while coordinating with Bora's constant system modifications. Zoom was monitoring everything from enemy movements to power levels. None of them looked like they wanted to retreat. "I don't know if we can win, Madam President, but someone has to try. If we don't stand up to these things now, who will?" President Hana was quiet for several long seconds. When she spoke again, her voice was firm. "Very well. Earth Command is authorizing full combat operations. We're dispatching reinforcements, but they won't reach you for several hours. Hold your position, Captain." The communication ended, leaving the crew of the Hanbit alone with the monsters again. But something was changing in the space around them. Sumi was detecting new signals on her equipment. "Captain," she said with wonder in her voice, "I'm picking up communications from all over the galaxy, dozens of different sources all talking about us." Dr. Hyun-woo was working frantically to translate the flood of alien languages. "They're watching our fight, Captain. Species I've never heard of are monitoring what we're doing. They seem amazed." One of the devourers managed to catch the handbit with its tentacles, pulling the ship toward its massive mouth. But Tae-young fired the main engines while spinning the ship in a corkscrew pattern. The maneuver tore them free, though it left deep scratches in the ship's hull. "Hull breach on Deck 4, Bora reported. "Emergency force fields are holding, but we can't take many more hits like that." Jin-ae found her target and fired everything they had. The concentrated beam, enhanced by alien technology and human determination, punched through the devourer's organic armor and struck something vital inside. The creature convulsed once and then went still, floating dead among the asteroids. They had killed one of the devourers. Something that was supposed to be impossible had actually happened. The alien communications that Sumi was monitoring suddenly became much more active. Dr. Hyun-woo was getting translations as fast as his equipment could process them. "Captain, they're talking about us across the galaxy. No one has ever seen anything like this before. One species is asking if humans might be mentally defective because we're not running away." The remaining two devourers were more careful now. They had learned that the small human ship could hurt them, but they were also calling for help. Sumi's long-range sensors showed larger shapes moving toward them from deeper in the system. "The main fleet is coming," Jin-ae reported, her voice tight with tension. "I count 15 major vessels, each one larger than the scouts we've been fighting." Captain Daeho studied the tactical display. 15 of those city-sized monsters against one damaged research ship. Even with all their modifications and alien technology, the mathematics were clear. They were going to die. But as he looked around at his crew, he realized that none of them were suggesting surrender. None of them were asking to run away. They were humans, and humans didn't abandon people who needed help, even when help seemed impossible. "All stations, prepare for the main engagement," Daeho ordered. "Let's show this galaxy what humans are made of." The Hanbit turned toward the approaching Devourer fleet. Around them, invisible watchers from dozens of civilizations observed in amazement as a single species chose to fight the impossible fight. Not for conquest or survival, but simply because it was the right thing to do. In the hidden alien ship nearby, Kithara watched the human vessel face impossible odds and felt something that Villani had thought was extinct in the galaxy. Hope. History was about to be written in fire and courage among the stars. 3 weeks later, the Hanbit dropped out of hyperspace into what looked like the end of the world. Captain Daeho stood on the bridge, staring out at a scene of destruction so complete that it took his mind several moments to process what he was seeing. Where there should have been planets, there were only clouds of broken rock and metal floating in space. The debris field stretched in all directions, glittering in the light of the system's dying star. What had once been a thriving solar system with multiple worlds was now nothing more than cosmic gravel. "Dear God," whispered Sumi from her station. "What happened here?" Bora was running full sensor sweeps, trying to make sense of the readings. "Captain, I'm detecting massive amounts of organic and metallic debris. The composition suggests these were once inhabited worlds. Billions of tons of processed materials, refined metals, even traces of what might have been cities." Dr. Hyun-woo was studying the destruction patterns on his screen. "It looks like the planets were systematically taken apart piece by piece. Not destroyed by weapons, but actually dismantled and consumed. The alien distress signal was much stronger now, coming from somewhere deep within the largest debris field. But there was something else on the sensors, something that made everyone's blood run cold. "Captain," Bora said quietly, "there are large objects moving through the debris, multiple contacts, each one roughly the size of a city." The main screen shifted to show what the sensors had detected. Massive biomechanical shapes drifted slowly between the broken remains of worlds. They looked like a nightmare fusion of living creature and machine, covered in rippling flesh and gleaming metal. Long tentacles reached out from their bodies, grabbing chunks of debris and pulling them into enormous mouths lined with rotating blade teeth. "The Devourers," Hyun-woo said, his voice barely above a whisper. The crew watched in horrified fascination as one of the creatures consumed a piece of debris the size of a building. The organic parts of its body pulsed and grew slightly larger, while the mechanical components reorganized themselves to accommodate the new material. "They're still feeding," Jin-ae observed from the tactical station.
"Even though they've already destroyed everything in this system, They're still consuming the remains. Tae Young, the ship's pilot, was studying the movement patterns of the devourers.
They're not moving randomly, Captain. They have search patterns like they're looking for something specific. Sumi's equipment suddenly came alive with activity. The alien distress signal just got much stronger. Whatever's broadcasting it is close, very close. Following the signal source, they found it hidden in the shadow of a massive asteroid cluster. The alien ship was wedged between two large rocks, clearly using them as camouflage. Even up close, it was difficult to make out the ship's exact shape, because it seemed to be made of some kind of living crystal that reflected and refracted light in strange ways. Life signs? Captain Deho asked. Sumi checked her instruments carefully. Faint, but definitely present. Someone's alive over there, but their power levels are very low. The alien ship was too damaged to attempt a docking procedure. Hull breaches and twisted metal made it impossible for the Hanbit to connect safely. Deho made the decision to take a small team across in environmental suits. I'm going with you, Dr. Hyunwoo said immediately. So am I, added Bora. If their ship's systems are still working, I might be able to help. The three humans crossed the gap between ships in a small shuttle, moving carefully to avoid attracting the attention of the devourers feeding in the distance. The alien ship's airlock was damaged, but Bora managed to get it working long enough for them to enter. Inside, the ship was like nothing they had ever seen. The walls appeared to be made of living crystal that pulsed with soft fading light. The air was thin but breathable, though it had a strange taste that reminded Hyunwoo of ozone and flowers. They followed the signal deeper into the ship, passing through corridors that seemed to have grown rather than been built. Emergency lighting flickered on and off, casting eerie shadows on the crystalline walls. The bridge was a circular room with no clear floor or ceiling. Organic-looking control surfaces grew from the walls, and streams of light flowed through transparent tubes like some kind of information network. In the center of the room, connected to multiple life support devices, was their first alien. The creature was beautiful and alien at the same time. Its body appeared to be made of the same living crystal as the ship, with soft light flowing through its transparent flesh like luminous blood. It was roughly humanoid in shape, but taller and more graceful than any human. Its head was elongated with large eyes that seemed to contain tiny stars. The alien's light was very dim now, flickering like a candle about to go out. It noticed their arrival and turned its head toward them with obvious effort. Dr. Hyunwoo activated his translation equipment and spoke slowly. Hello, we received your distress signal. We've come to help. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the alien's body flared with slightly brighter light and words came through the translator, broken and hard to understand. You came. Did not think anyone would come. 2 years. No answer. Thought Galaxy had forgotten how to care. We're here now, Deho said gently. What do you need? How can we help? The alien, who managed to tell them its name was Kathera, looked at them with what might have been amazement. Through the struggling translation system, Kathara began to tell them a story that chilled their hearts. The Devourers had been moving through the galaxy for thousands of years, consuming everything in their path. Whenever they attacked a star system, word would spread quickly to nearby civilizations. The response was always the same: immediate evacuation. Every intelligent species had learned the same lesson. Fighting the Devourers meant extinction. No one fights them, Kethera explained, the alien's voice growing weaker with each word. Fighting means death. All species know this. Only choice is run or be eaten. But you sent out a distress signal, Bora pointed out. You were asking for help. Yes, my people, the Villani, we hoped. Maybe someone different would hear. Someone who would choose to help instead of run. But 2 years of calling, no answer. We were wrong to hope. Deho felt something burning in his chest. Anger at a galaxy that would abandon people in need, and determination to prove that not everyone had given up on helping others. You weren't wrong, he said firmly. We're here. Humans don't abandon people who need help. Kithara's crystalline body pulsed with light, brighter than it had been since they arrived. Humans, your species? You choose to fight the Devourers, even knowing you will probably die? The three humans looked at each other. They all understood the odds. Their small research ship against creatures that had consumed entire worlds. It should have been an easy decision, help Cathara escape and then run back to human space as fast as possible. But none of them were thinking about running. Yes, Deho said simply. We'll fight them. Cathara made a sound that the translator couldn't interpret, but it sounded almost like laughter mixed with crying. Impossible. Your species must be insane. No rational beings choose certain death for strangers. Before any of the humans could respond, alarms started sounding on both ships. Zumi's voice crackled through their communication devices. Captain, we have a problem. 3 Devourer scouts are moving toward our position. They've detected us. Through the damaged windows of the alien ship, they could see the massive creatures changing direction, their tentacles reaching out as they moved toward the hidden ships like predators that had caught the scent of prey. We need to get back to our ship, Deho said. But Cathara stopped them with a weak gesture. Wait. Before you die fighting them, you should know the truth. The alien's body flared with light as it activated some kind of data transfer system. I will give you all the information my people gathered about the Devourers. Also the locations of other species hiding throughout the galaxy. Hundreds of civilizations, all afraid, all hiding. Information began flowing into the Hanbit's computer systems. Star charts, tactical data, historical records, and the locations of dozens of alien species that humanity had never known existed. When you die today, Cathara said sadly, at least your sacrifice will mean something. Maybe someday another species will find this information and do something with it. As they hurried back to their ship, Captain Deho realized that in the next few minutes, they would either make history or become history. The first Devourer scout was already approaching, and there was nowhere left to run. Word of the impossible battle spread across the galaxy, faster than anyone could have imagined. On thousands of hidden worlds, civilizations that had been silent for centuries suddenly began talking again. Ancient communication networks that had been shut down to avoid attracting the Devourers came back to life, buzzing with excited conversations about what was happening in the distant star system. The human reinforcement ship Mugungwa arrived just as the massive Devourer fleet was forming up for their final attack. Officer Wojin had never seen anything like what was happening around them. Space was filled with the enormous biomechanical shapes of 15 Devourer vessels, each one capable of eating an entire planet. But what made Wojin's heart race was something else entirely. Ships were appearing everywhere. From behind asteroids, from inside gas clouds, from hiding places that should have been impossible to use. Dozens of alien vessels were emerging from concealment, their hulls reflecting starlight in ways that human eyes had never seen before. Captain Lee, Wojin said to his commanding officer, "Are you seeing this on the sensors?" Captain Lee was staring at his instruments with disbelief. "I'm seeing it, but I don't understand it. There are at least 60 alien ships out there, maybe more." The alien vessels were incredible to look at. Some appeared to be made of pure energy, glowing with their own internal light. Others looked like they had been grown rather than built, with organic curves and flowing lines. A few were so strange that the human sensors couldn't even determine what materials they were made from. But none of them were fighting. They were all just watching. Back on the Hanbit, Dr. Hunwoo was struggling to translate the flood of communications pouring in from every direction. His equipment was working at maximum capacity, trying to process dozens of different alien languages at the same time. "Captain," Hyunwoo said breathlessly, "I'm getting transmissions from species I never knew existed. The Cathara, the hegemony survivors, something called drift riders. They're all talking about us, debating what we're doing." "What are they saying?" Deho asked while the ship shook from another attack by the Devourer scouts. "They're trying to understand why we're not running away. Some think we're too primitive to understand the danger. Others think we might be genuinely willing to die for strangers, which apparently no other species has ever done." Cathara, still connected to the Hanbit systems through the data link Bora had established, managed to speak to them despite the aliens' weakening condition. "Captain Deho," Cathara said, "you must understand what is happening. These species have been hiding for thousands of years. They have watched the Devourers destroy hundreds of civilizations. Every single time the pattern is the same." "What pattern?" Deho asked. "Fight briefly when first attacked, assess the situation, then retreat when losses become too great. This is how intelligent species survive. No one has ever fought to the death for principles alone." "We're still here," Deho pointed out. "Yes, and that is what frightens them. They think you will fight until every human is dead, and then the devourers will still be alive to hunt everyone else. They are watching to see if you are truly different, or if you will eventually do what every other species does. The battle was getting worse by the minute. Even with the Mugunghwa helping, the two human ships were badly outnumbered. Jin'e was coordinating their defense with mathematical precision, but for every devourer they managed to damage, more seemed to take its place. Hull breach on Deck 6, Bora reported from her engineering station. We're losing atmosphere on 3 levels. Tae Young was still performing incredible flying maneuvers, but the young pilot was exhausted. His hands shook slightly as he guided the ship through another impossible turn. The Hanbit couldn't keep taking this kind of punishment much longer. That was when Captain Lee of the Mugunghwa made a decision that shocked everyone watching. Instead of trying to maintain a safe fighting distance, he ordered his ship to move directly toward the largest devourer vessel. "This is Captain Lee to all ships in the area," he announced on an open channel that every alien vessel could hear. "I want everyone to understand something about humans. We don't fight for territory or resources or even our own survival. We fight because people are in trouble and they need help. If you want to know what makes us different from every other species in this galaxy, watch what happens next." The Mugunghwa accelerated directly at the monster that was easily 10 times its size. It looked like a suicide attack that would accomplish nothing except the destruction of another human ship. Officer Wo Jin, monitoring the alien communications from his station, heard something incredible happening. The watching species stopped talking about whether humans were crazy. They started talking about something they had apparently never seen before, a species that fought without any hope of personal gain. "They're arguing with each other," Wojin reported excitedly. "Some of them are saying we must be defective as a species, but others are saying they've never seen anything like this." Dr. Hyunwoo was getting more translations every second. "Captain, they're starting to understand. They've never encountered a species that fights hopeless battles for moral reasons rather than survival. It's completely outside their experience." The Mugunghwa's apparent suicide run turned into something else entirely. At the last possible moment, Captain Lee's pilot executed a maneuver that should have been impossible. The ship spun around the devourer's grasping tentacles and fired all its weapons into the creature's core from point-blank range. The massive devourer exploded in a burst of organic matter and twisted metal, taking 2 smaller ones with it in the chain reaction. The alien communication networks went completely silent for several seconds. Then they exploded with activity like nothing Hyunwoo had ever heard. "Captain," Sumi said with wonder in her voice, "they're talking about joining the fight. Some of them are actually debating whether to help us, but their hope was short-lived." The sensors showed something that made everyone's blood turn cold. More devourer fleets were arriving from other star systems, jumping out of hyperspace in massive groups. The screen filled with hundreds of new contacts. "How many are there?" Wojin asked quietly. "I count over 300 vessels," Jin'e replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Some of them are larger than anything we've seen so far." The alien observers fell silent again. This was the reality they all knew too well. This was why civilizations ran instead of fighting. The devourers had endless numbers and they never stopped coming until everything was consumed. Captain Daeho looked at the tactical display showing the massive enemy fleet forming up around them. His ship was badly damaged. The Mugunghwa wasn't in much better condition. They had managed to destroy maybe a dozen devourers, but hundreds more had taken their place. Any reasonable commander would order a retreat. They had proven their courage. They had shown the galaxy that humans were different. Now it was time to escape and live to fight another day. But Daeho looked at his crew one more time. They were tired, scared, and hurt. But not one of them was looking toward the escape routes on the navigation display. They were all looking at him, waiting for orders. He thought about Kethera dying slowly in the crystal ship. He thought about the hundreds of civilizations hiding in fear across the galaxy. He thought about what it meant to be human. "No," he said finally, opening a channel to every ship in the system. "We didn't come here to prove we were brave. We didn't come here to show off. We came here to help someone who needed help. And that's what we're going to do." The 2 human ships turned toward the massive devourer armada, impossibly small but absolutely determined. Around them, representatives of dozens of alien civilizations watched and waited to see what would happen when a species chose death over abandoning their principles. "What?" happened next would echo through the stars for generations to come. The final battle began in complete silence. 300 Devourer ships formed a wall of death that stretched across space, their biomechanical hulls pulsing with hunger and ancient malice. Against this massive force, 2 small human ships moved forward without hesitation, tiny sparks of defiance against an ocean of darkness. Captain Deho watched the tactical display and knew they had perhaps minutes left to live. Around him, his crew worked with quiet determination. They had made their choice, and they would see it through to the very end. Then something happened that changed everything. A ship made of living crystal emerged from behind a massive asteroid and fired a beam of pure energy that cut through 5 Devourer vessels like they were made of paper. The beam was so bright that it lit up the entire battlefield, and when it faded, the massive enemies were simply gone. What? Deho stared at his screen in amazement. More ships appeared. The hegemony survivors brought weapons that created tears in space itself, swallowing entire Devourer vessels into collapsing black holes. The Drift Riders materialized from the empty void between stars, using technology that turned the system's gas clouds into weapons of incredible power. Within moments, the space around the human ships was filled with dozens of alien vessels. Species that had hidden in fear for thousands of years were suddenly fighting side by side, inspired by the example of 2 small human ships that had refused to abandon a stranger in need. Dr. Hyunwoo was working frantically to translate the flood of communications coming from every direction. "Captain, they're saying they couldn't watch us die alone. They're saying we've reminded them what courage looks like." The Devourers, who had conquered galaxy after galaxy by hunting isolated prey, suddenly found themselves facing something they had never encountered before: a coordinated defense by dozens of different species working together. Mi Young, the medical officer aboard the Hanbit, found herself treating injuries she had never imagined possible. Crystalline beings who bled light instead of blood, energy creatures who needed their containment fields repaired rather than bandages, living plants from ocean worlds who required special atmospheric mixtures to survive. "This is incredible," she said to Dr. Hyunwoo as she worked. "I'm learning more about alien biology in 1 hour than our entire species has discovered in all our history." The battle became something both beautiful and terrible to watch. The Kithara ships moved like dancers, their crystal hulls reflecting the light of their weapons in patterns that dazzled the eye. The hegemony survivors fought with ancient weapons that bent reality itself. Dozens of other species contributed their own unique technologies and fighting styles, but the humans remained at the center of it all. Their simple determination and refusal to give up had become the glue that held this impossible alliance together. Officer Wojin aboard the Mugunghwa was serving as a communications coordinator between species, trying to help them work together effectively. "Captain Lee, this is amazing. We're not just winning, we're destroying them." It was true. The Devourers had been built to hunt alone and consume isolated worlds. They couldn't adapt to the chaotic creativity of dozens of species fighting together. Every time they tried to counter one species' tactics, 3 others would attack from completely unexpected directions. But the greatest shock came when the humans demonstrated something even more surprising than their courage: a damaged Devourer ship, its biomechanical systems failing and leaking fluids into space, drifted helplessly near the human vessels. Everyone in the Allied fleet expected the humans to finish off their helpless enemy. Instead, Captain Deho opened a communication channel directly to the dying ship. "Devourer vessel," he said calmly. "Your ship is disabled and your crew is in danger. Surrender now, and we will provide medical assistance and safe passage." The entire galaxy seemed to pause. Every alien species monitoring the battle stopped talking. Dr. Hyunwoo was getting frantic translations from dozens of civilizations, all asking the same question. "Captain," they're all confused. They want to know what surrender means in this situation. Apparently, the concept of offering mercy to a defeated enemy is completely unknown to galactic civilization. For thousands of years, every conflict in the galaxy had ended with the complete destruction of one side or the other. The idea of helping your enemies after defeating them was so alien that most species didn't even have words for it. The response from the Devourer ship was even more shocking. Instead of the usual roars of defiance or threats of revenge, a different kind of signal came through, weak, confused, and almost grateful. "How?" the alien voice asked. "How do you offer help to those who tried to consume you?" Dr. Yunwoo worked desperately to improve the translation systems. What came through next changed everything they thought they knew about their enemies. "We were not always like this," the Devourer said. "Long ago we were builders and creators, but the hunger was programmed into us by those who came before, those who are now gone. We have forgotten how to be anything except devourers. You offer to help us remember?" Captain Daeho felt his heart racing. What if the Devourers weren't evil by choice? What if they were victims too, trapped in a cycle of destruction they couldn't break free from? "We can try to help," he said to the alien ship. "But first you have to stop attacking everyone." What followed was the most extraordinary moment in galactic history. One by one, the remaining Devourer ships powered down their weapons. The creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for thousands of years were asking for help, instead of trying to destroy everything around them. Cathara, still barely alive in the crystal ship, managed to speak through the communication link. "Impossible. In all our records, no one has ever offered mercy to the Devourers. No one ever thought they could be saved. We're human," Captain Daeho said simply. "We believe anyone can change if they really want to." The battle was over, but the real work was just beginning. Ships from dozens of species began working together to help the Devourers remember who they had been before the artificial hunger consumed their minds. Mi Young found herself treating Devourer crew members, beings that had been part machine and part organic creature for so long, they had forgotten what it felt like to be whole. Other species contributed their knowledge of biology, psychology, and advanced technology. Months later, the galaxy was transformed. The Galactic Cooperation Initiative, based on the human colony of New Busan, coordinated the largest rehabilitation project in history. Former Devourer bioships were converted into mobile hospitals and construction vessels, helping to rebuild the worlds they had once destroyed. Captain Daeho, recovering from his injuries back on Earth, received a message from Cathara. The Villani had not only survived but was now serving as an ambassador between the various species. "Captain," Cathara's message said, "you asked us why no one answered our distress call for 2 years. Now we understand the answer. The galaxy was not waiting for warriors or conquerors or even heroes. It was waiting for teachers. Thank you for showing us that the strongest power is not the ability to destroy enemies, but the ability to turn enemies into friends." The message included coordinates, hundreds of them, representing distress signals that were now being broadcast openly across the galaxy. Every species that had been hiding in fear was now asking for help, because they knew that someone would answer. The newest human ship, called the Hope's Answer, launched that same week. Its mission was not exploration or conquest, but something far more important: answering every call for help, no matter how dangerous or impossible it might seem. As the ship jumped into hyperspace toward its first rescue mission, humanity had found its purpose among the stars. They were not meant to be rulers or conquerors. They were meant to be the ones who came when others called for help, the ones who never gave up on anyone, and the ones who believed that everyone deserved a second chance. The galaxy was full of voices now, and humanity would make sure every single one was heard. The stars looked the same as they always had when Captain Daeho walked onto the bridge that morning. Bright points of light scattered across the darkness of space, each one hiding secrets that humans had not yet discovered. The research ship Hanbit moved slowly through the void, its engines humming quietly as the crew went about their daily work. They had been traveling for 6 months now, farther from Earth than any human had ever gone before. The ship was not built for war or conquest. It was built for discovery. Scientists, linguists, engineers, and explorers all worked together on board, hoping to find new worlds and maybe answer the old question that had puzzled humanity for centuries. Are we alone in the universe? Sumi sat at her communication station, headphones covering her ears as she listened to the endless static of deep space. Her job was to monitor all the radio frequencies, looking for any sign of intelligence among the cosmic noise. Most days she heard nothing but the natural sounds of stars and planets. Solar flares, magnetic fields, asteroid collisions. The universe was full of noise, but none of it meant anything. Today felt different. She had been listening to a strange pattern for almost an hour now. At first she thought it might be interference from the ship's own systems. But the more she listened, the more convinced she became that this was something else entirely. The pattern had structure. It repeated itself, but with small changes each time, like a song with verses. There were mathematical relationships hidden in the signals, prime numbers and geometric sequences that could not be natural. Someone, or something, was deliberately creating these sounds. Sumi took off her headphones and looked around the bridge. Captain Daiho was reading reports at his station. The other crew members were busy with their own tasks. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if she should say anything. What if she was wrong? What if it was just her imagination? But the patterns were getting stronger. Whatever was making these signals was getting closer, or the signals were getting more powerful. "Captain," she said finally, her voice quiet but urgent, "I think you need to hear this." Daiho looked up from his reports. Sumi was one of the most experienced communication officers in the fleet. If she thought something was important, it probably was. "What is it?" he asked, walking over to her station. "Listen to this," she said, putting the signals through the bridge speakers. The sound filled the bridge, a complex mixture of tones and pulses that rose and fell in mathematical patterns. It was unlike anything any of them had heard before, beautiful in its complexity, but also somehow urgent. Dr. Hyunwoo came running from his laboratory when he heard the sounds. As the ship's expert on languages and communication, he had been hoping for something like this his entire career. His eyes went wide as he listened to the patterns. "This is not random," he said, grabbing his portable computer and starting to record everything. "This is definitely artificial. Someone is trying to communicate." Bora, the ship's chief engineer, joined them at the communication station. She was practical and logical, always looking for explanations that made sense. "Could it be one of our other ships? Maybe a relay satellite with damaged equipment?" Sumi shook her head. "I've checked all our frequencies. This is not coming from any human source. Also, look at this." She showed them the directional readings on her screen. "The signal is coming from outside our solar system." Way outside? The bridge became very quiet as everyone realized what this meant. If the signal was not human, and it showed clear signs of intelligence, then they had just made the most important discovery in human history. They were not alone. Dr. Hyunwoo worked frantically with his equipment, trying to break down the signal into its component parts. He had studied every human language and communication system, but this was completely different. The mathematical relationships were familiar, but the way they were put together was alien. "Captain," he said after working for several hours, "I think this is a distress call." "What makes you think that?" Daiho asked. Hyunwoo showed them his analysis on the main screen. "See these repetitive patterns here? They're getting more frequent and more intense over time. That suggests urgency. And these mathematical sequences, they're showing us star charts, but some of the systems are marked with symbols that suggest destruction or danger." Bora had been quietly working on tracing the signal's origin. "Captain, I've got coordinates. The signal is coming from a star system approximately 3 light-years from our current position. That would take us about 3 weeks to reach if we use maximum jump speed." 3 weeks, Daiho repeated thoughtfully. If someone was in distress, 3 weeks might be too long to wait for help. Hyunwoo made another discovery that changed everything. "Captain, there's something else. This signal has been broadcasting for a long time. Based on the power degradation patterns, I estimate it's been transmitting for at least 2 years. 2 years? Sumi asked. If it's a distress call, why hasn't anyone answered it? That question hung in the air like a weight. If there were other intelligent species in the galaxy, surely someone would have heard this signal by now. The fact that it was still broadcasting meant either no one else had received it, or no one else cared enough to respond. Over the next few hours, Hyunwoo continued to decode more of the message. What he found was both amazing and terrifying. The signal contained detailed information about something called the Devourers, creatures or machines that consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing behind but empty space. The star chart showed the progression of destruction across multiple star systems. Dozens of worlds had been attacked and completely destroyed. The beings sending the signal were apparently the last survivors of their species, hiding in the ruins of their civilization and calling for help. "Captain," Hyunwoo said, his voice filled with wonder and fear, "I found something incredible. There's a test built into this signal." "What kind of test?" Daiho asked. "The exact location of the aliens is encrypted. To decode it, you have to solve a complex mathematical puzzle. But the puzzle can only be solved if you understand that the solution requires you to actually travel to help them. It's like they're making sure that only people who really want to help can find them." The implications of this were staggering. Any species advanced enough to receive and decode this signal would also be smart enough to understand the risks. If these devourers were as dangerous as the message suggested, going to help might mean certain death. Captain Deho looked around at his crew. They were all listening intently, understanding the magnitude of what they had discovered. They had found proof that intelligent life existed beyond Earth, but that life was in terrible danger, and apparently no one in the galaxy was willing to help. So we might be the first species to solve this puzzle, he asked. We might be the first species willing to solve it, Hyunwoo replied. The bridge was silent for a long time as everyone considered what this meant. They were just one small research ship with basic defensive systems. They were not prepared for a war against creatures that could destroy entire worlds. But somewhere out there, someone was dying and calling for help. Deho thought about the principles that had guided humanity's expansion into space. They had always believed that intelligent life should be protected and helped, regardless of the cost. Now they had a chance to prove that those principles meant something. Plot a course for the source of the signal, he ordered finally. We're going to answer that call. The crew immediately began preparations for the journey. No one questioned the decision. No one suggested they should call Earth for instructions or wait for backup. They had found someone in need and they were going to help. As the Hanbit prepared to jump to faster than light speed, Captain Deho wondered what they would find when they arrived. Would they be too late? Would they be strong enough to make a difference? And most importantly, why was humanity apparently the only species in the galaxy willing to risk everything for strangers? The stars streaked past the windows as the ship entered hyperspace, carrying the first humans toward a meeting that would change the fate of the entire galaxy. Behind them, the alien distress signal continued to broadcast into the void, finally receiving an answer after 2 long years of silence.